You've met someone new and everything seems to be falling into place. They're intelligent, confident, and they have this mysterious aura about them that draws you in. At first, everything seems perfect. You're not sure what it is, but you feel this undeniable connection. And yet, deep down, you start noticing little things, little behaviors that raise some red flags. It's not enough to throw everything off, but it's enough to make you question, is this the person I should be with? Are these red flags a deal breaker, or is this just part of who they are? The thing about the Sigma personality is that they often come across as distant, hard to read, and sometimes they can be misunderstood. They might not always express their emotions the way you expect, and their need for independence can sometimes be mistaken for coldness. So how do you know when a red flag is just a part of their personality, and when it's something that should make you walk away? Let's talk about one of the biggest red flags you may encounter with a Sigma, and that's emotional unavailability. Now, don't get it twisted. Sigma individuals often value their independence, and they aren't the type to wear their emotions on their sleeve. But when does this become a problem? When does their need for emotional distance cross the line from healthy independence to emotional neglect? You might feel like they're just not interested in connecting with you on a deeper level, where they could brush off any attempts to discuss the future or your feelings. You might catch them shutting down when you try to talk about anything personal, and that leaves you feeling more isolated than connected. Now you have to ask yourself, is this just the way they are? Is their emotional distance something I can accept? Or is this a major red flag that makes this relationship impossible to thrive? Then there's the issue of control. One of the things you'll notice about a Sigma partner is their need for control over certain aspects of their life. But how far does this go? Do they try to control your life as well, or are they just focused on their own independence? A Sigma might not be interested in playing games or putting up with drama, and that's totally fine. But if they start dictating your actions, limiting your freedom, or making you feel like you're always walking on eggshells, that's a serious problem. It's one thing to want control over your own space, your own time, but it's another thing entirely when they start trying to control your decisions. Now ask yourself, do you feel like you're being suffocated, or are you just having a hard time accepting their need for control? Can you find a balance, or is this a deal breaker for you? Another red flag to look out for is their lack of empathy. Now, Sigma individuals often come across as logical and sometimes detached. And it's important to recognize that they might not always show emotions in the way you expect. But when does their detached nature start to feel like a lack of care? If you find yourself constantly being dismissed when you share your feelings or experiences, or if they downplay your emotions without any attempt to understand, that's a serious issue. Everyone deserves to feel heard and valued. And if they're consistently unable or unwilling to show empathy, then this could be a sign that they're not the right partner for you. It's easy to tell yourself that you're being too sensitive, but when your partner consistently invalidates your emotions, it's something that can take a toll on your self-worth. So ask yourself, can you be with someone who doesn't empathize with your feelings? Or do you need someone who can support you emotionally? Now let's talk about their need for space. Sigma personalities are often fiercely independent, and they require time alone to recharge and reflect. This need for personal space can be a healthy trait. But when does it cross the line into avoidance? If they retreat into their own world for long periods, not communicating or engaging with you, it can leave you feeling neglected. There's a fine line between needing space and completely shutting down, and if their need for isolation starts affecting your relationship, it's important to assess whether this is something you can handle, or if it's a deal breaker. Everyone has different needs when it comes to space, but if you feel like you're being shut out emotionally and physically, it might be time to reconsider your compatibility. Are you okay with their need for space, or does it make you feel abandoned and disconnected? Another important factor to consider is their inability to communicate. Sigmas tend to be quiet, introspective, and sometimes difficult to read. But when does their silence become a problem? If they refuse to communicate about important issues, like the future expectations or their feelings towards you, this lack of communication can create a serious gap in the relationship. It's not about being open all the time, but a relationship requires some level of healthy communication. If you're the one constantly initiating conversations, trying to get them to open up, and they refuse to meet you halfway, this lack of communication can lead to frustration and misunderstanding. Ask yourself, can you live with someone who shuts down emotionally and refuses to communicate when things get difficult? Or is this a deal breaker for you? Let's talk about how their past experiences might affect your relationship. Sometimes Sigmas have a history that they don't want to talk about. Whether it's past relationships, personal struggles, or family issues, they often keep these things to themselves. However, if they're constantly bringing up their past or comparing you to their exes, that's a major red flag. It's one thing to be reserved, but when they constantly reference the past, it can make you feel like you're never going to measure up. No one wants to feel like they're in competition with someone who came before them. And if your Sigma partner can't seem to let go of their past, it may be time to question whether they're truly ready to move forward with you. Ask yourself, do I feel like I'm constantly competing with their past, or do I feel accepted for who I am in this relationship? Now, these red flags can feel overwhelming, but they are also important to recognize. You need to assess whether these behaviors are something you can work with, or if they're too deeply ingrained in their personality. Sometimes, red flags are just part of someone's nature. But that doesn't mean they're not a deal breaker. Only you can decide whether the compatibility is strong enough to make the relationship work, and whether these red flags are things you can live with. So take a moment and think about it. Can you handle these behaviors? Or are they deal breakers for you? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share because you'll learn even more about recognizing compatibility and understanding red flags in the next video. Stay tuned.